The line starts forming before dawn on Coruscant's level 1313. Hundreds of us, maybe thousands, shuffling forward in the dim glow of flickering lumen strips. The air smells like recycled sweat and desperation. We're all here for the same thing, our weekly food allocation from the Imperial distribution center. I've been doing this for 3 years now, ever since the Empire consolidated control and implemented the Galactic Nutrition Efficiency Program. That's what they call it on the holo propaganda screens. We call it something else entirely. The man in front of me is coughing, a wet, rattling sound that makes me take a step back. His skin has that grayish tint you see a lot down here. Vitamin deficiency, probably. Or worse. Nobody asks anymore. "Move along!" A stormtrooper barks from his post. His armor gleams white against the rust-stained walls. Clean. Federal protected. Everything we're not. I keep my head down and shuffle forward. The distribution center itself is a converted warehouse, all Dura-Steel and harsh lighting. As we funnel through the entrance, I catch sight of the propaganda poster plastered across the wall. The Empire provides. Serve with gratitude. Yeah. Sure. Inside, the process is brutally efficient. You scan your citizen ID chip at the terminal. A mechanical voice confirms your sector, occupation tier, and loyalty rating. Then a conveyor belt spits out your weekly ration pack, a sealed gray container about the size of a shoebox. No choices. No substitutions. No questions. I grab mine and get out before the stormtroopers can find a reason to delay me. Some people linger, hoping for extra. Those people usually end up in the detention queue, and nobody wants that. Outside, I crack open the container to see what nutrition the Empire has blessed me with this week. The smell hits me first, that distinctive chemical tang mixed with something vaguely organic. I've learned not to think too hard about it. Inside, 6 gray-brown bars labeled Nutri-Bloc Standard Issue. 3 packets of something called hydro-paste vegetable analog. 2 small cubes of what might generously be called protein compressed ration. And at the bottom, a single piece of actual fruit. A withered jogan fruit so small and dried, it probably fell off the tree during the Clone Wars. This is what 3 billion people on Coruscant alone are eating. Every day. Every week. Every year. Welcome to the Empire's dinner table. Let me tell you about Nutri-Bloc. It's the cornerstone of the Imperial diet. Compressed blocks of, well, that's the question, isn't it? According to official documentation, Nutri-Bloc contains synthesized proteins, fortified carbohydrates, essential vitamins and minerals. Sounds almost healthy when you put it that way. The reality? Nobody really knows. The blocks are manufactured in massive automated facilities on industrial worlds like Fondor and Kuat. The ingredients are classified. The processing is classified. Even asking too many questions about it can get you flagged for seditious inquiry. What we do know, it tastes like recycled cardboard, mixed with chemical sweetener. The texture is somewhere between compressed sawdust and plasteel, and if you eat it dry, it'll suck every drop of moisture from your mouth. Most people break it into chunks and boil it in water to make a kind of gruel. Some add whatever spices they can scrounge, salt, pepper, anything to mask the taste. I knew a Rhodian on level 1287 who swore by adding engine degreaser. Gives it flavor, he said. He died 6 months later. Might be unrelated. The really disturbing part? The whispers. The rumors that circulate in the lower levels when people think the surveillance droids aren't listening. They're recycling the dead, someone will mutter over a shared meal in a Hab block's common room. The bodies from the detention centers, the work camps. Where do you think all that biomass goes? Impossible, someone else says, but their voice lacks conviction. Why do you think they collect the bodies so fast? Why do you think cremation is mandatory now? They're not wasting resources. The Empire doesn't waste anything. I don't know if it's true. I don't want to know. But I've noticed something. Nutri-Bloc has this faint, almost metallic aftertaste. And sometimes, just sometimes, you'll find something in a block that shouldn't be there. A fleck of something that looks organic. A tiny fragment that might have once been… Well, I've learned to eat in the dark. It's easier that way. But wait, you might say. What about the agricultural worlds? Doesn't the Empire have entire planets dedicated to farming? Oh, they do. Worlds like Salish, Ukiyo, Dantooine, vast agricultural operations producing mountains of grain, herds of nerf, orchards of fruit, real food, actual nutrition. And where does all that food go? Not to us. I used to work the distribution logs, back when I had a clerical position before the workforce optimization demoted me to factory labor. I saw the shipping manifests. I know where the real food goes. The military gets first pick. Stormtroopers, officers, naval personnel. They eat actual meals. Reconstituted, sure, but real protein. Real vegetables. Real flavor. The core worlds get second tier. If you live on Coruscant's upper levels, or Corellia's palace districts, or any wealthy sector, you can buy fresh food in markets. Expensive, heavily taxed, but available. The Imperial bureaucracy gets their share. Every petty official and their families, fed on the labor of worlds while they shuffle datapads and enforce quotas. And what's left? The scraps? The waste? The parts deemed unsuitable for primary consumption. That's what gets processed into Nutri-Bloc and shipped to the lower classes. We're eating the garbage, literally. I remember one time, must have been 2 years ago, a shipping container got mislabeled and ended up in our sector's distribution center. When they opened it, we saw actual produce inside. Real vegetables, leafy greens, root vegetables, things I hadn't seen since I was a child. People went crazy. A near riot broke out as workers tried to grab handfuls before the stormtroopers arrived. 3 people were shot. The rest of us were tear-gassed and beaten back. The vegetables were confiscated and redistributed to appropriate channels. We got our Nutri-Bloc rations docked for a month as punishment. I still dream about those vegetables sometimes. The colors, the smell. Food that actually looked like it came from a living plant instead of a factory vat. That's the cruelest part. Knowing the real food exists. Knowing it's being produced on worlds we'll never see. Eaten by people who will never understand what it's like to go your entire life without tasting anything that didn't come from a sealed gray container. Where there's scarcity, there's always a black market. And on Coruscant's lower levels, the food black market is as robust as it is dangerous. You want real meat? There's a Nikto in Sector 1285 who can get you bantha steaks. Don't ask where he sources them. Don't ask why they're so cheap. Just pay your credits and cook them thoroughly. Fresh fruit? There's a Twi'lek woman who smuggles in Jogan fruits and Meluran from off-world shipments. She charges 20 times the normal price. People pay it anyway, desperate for something that tastes like actual food. Spices, herbs, anything with flavor. All of it flows through the black market. The Empire technically allows these sales, but taxes them so heavily that only the wealthy can afford to buy legally. For the rest of us, it's illegal vendors in back alleys and abandoned hab blocks. The really desperate? They eat things I won't even describe. Roasted sewer rats, fungus scraped from ventilation ducts, insects bred in makeshift farms hidden in the walls, anything with protein. I knew a man, Jack, worked in the recycling plant, who started breeding Corellian beetles in his hab unit, crushed them into paste, mixed with Nutri-Bloc to stretch his rations. He'd sell the surplus to neighbors. "It's protein," he'd say defensively. Your body doesn't care if it comes from a beetle or a nerf. Protein is protein. He wasn't wrong, but it didn't make the crunching sound any easier to stomach. The ISB, Imperial Security Bureau, cracks down on the black market periodically. Not because they care about our health, but because unregulated food trade means unregulated social gathering. And unregulated gathering means potential sedition. When they raid a black market hub, they don't just arrest the vendors, they arrest the buyers too. Possession of unauthorized nutritional contraband can get you 6 months in a labor camp. I've been lucky so far, but every time I buy a small vial of real salt from a street vendor, I know I'm gambling with my freedom. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder, is it worth it? Risk imprisonment just to taste something that isn't gray and chemical? Then I take a bite of Nutri-Bloc, and I have my answer. Yes, anything is worth avoiding this. The worst part isn't what we eat, it's what the children eat. There's a generation growing up right now who have never tasted real food, never bitten into fresh fruit, never had a meal that wasn't gray, processed, and chemically stabilized. I see them in the education centers, thin, pale, stunted. Their development slower than it should be, their teeth rotting despite the fortified minerals the Empire claims are in our rations, their bones weak from vitamin deficiencies. The Empire's response: nutritional adequacy is maintained within acceptable parameters. Acceptable to whom? My neighbor has a daughter, Kira, 8 years old. Sweet kid. Curious. She once asked me, what does fresh mean? Like on the old hollows? I tried to explain. A fruit picked from a tree, vegetables pulled from soil, meat from an animal that once walked and breathed. She looked at me like I was describing a fairy tale. Maybe I was. The Empire provides supplemental nutrition programs in schools, which sounds generous until you realize it's just more Nutri-Bloc, but in smaller portions and labeled youth fortification formula. I've watched children trade their entire weekly rations for a single piece of candy on the black market. Real sugar, real flavor. They'll go hungry for days just to remember what sweetness tastes like. And the Empire wonders why recruitment for the Rebel Alliance keeps growing in the lower levels. You want to radicalize a population? Deprive them of the most basic human need, real food, while you gorge yourself in the palace above. Watch how quickly loyalty turns to rage. Kira asked me last week if the Emperor eats Nutri-Bloc. I didn't have the heart to tell her the truth. Sometimes I try to remember what real food tasted like, before the Empire, before the ration system. When I was young, before the Clone Wars ended and everything changed. I remember my mother making root leaf stew. She'd get ingredients from the local market, actual vegetables, some spices, maybe a bit of meat if we could afford it. The smell would fill our small apartment. The taste was, I can't quite recall anymore. But I remember it was good. It was real. I remember birthdays with sweet cakes, festivals with roasted meats and fruit wines, simple meals that didn't come from a factory or a lab. Those memories are fading now, like a dream you can't quite hold on to when you wake. And that's perhaps the saddest part of all. The Empire isn't just controlling what we eat now. They're erasing the memory of what food used to be. In another generation, no one will remember. They'll accept Nutri-Bloc as normal, as the way things have always been. And the Empire will have won completely. Not just our stomachs, but our very conception of what nourishment means. There's an old man in my hab block, Tenzin, must be in his 80s, who worked as a chef before the Empire. A real chef, in an actual restaurant on the upper levels. He's the only one left who can describe what gourmet meals tasted like. He sits in the common room sometimes, eyes closed, and describes dishes he used to make. Ronto wraps with tangy sauce, baked tikit grain with glazed vegetable medley, sweetbread pudding with candied fruit. The younger people listen like he's reciting ancient legends, which, in a way, he is. The Empire took many things from us, he said once, his voice trembling. Our freedom, our rights, our safety. But the cruelest theft? They took our food. They took taste itself. They reduced sustenance to function, and in doing so, they reduced us. I asked him if he regretted his memories, if forgetting might be easier. He shook his head. No. Remembering is our last rebellion. As long as we remember what food can be, what it should be, we remember that we deserve better. And that's dangerous to them. He's right, of course. Memory is dangerous. Hope is dangerous. So I hold on to these fading recollections. I tell Kira stories about meals I once had, even as the details blur. I refuse to forget that food is supposed to nourish not just the body, but the soul. The Empire can control what we eat, but they can't control what we remember. Not yet, anyway. So here we are, another morning, another ration line, another week of gray blocks and chemical paste. I peel back the wrapper on today's Nutri-Bloc bar, ration 2187B, according to the label, and take a bite. It tastes like nothing and everything wrong at once. My body accepts it as fuel. My mind rejects it as food. But I swallow anyway, because the alternative is starvation. And the Empire knows that. This is how they control us. Not with blasters and star destroyers, though those help, but with the most basic need. Food. They control the supply. They control the quality. They control who eats and who goes hungry. It's brilliant, really. Evil, but brilliant. A starving population is a compliant population, too exhausted to resist, too focused on survival to organize, too grateful for scraps to demand banquets. But here's what the Empire doesn't understand. Deprivation also breeds memory, and memory breeds longing, and longing, eventually, breeds revolution. Every time we choke down another Nutri-Bloc bar, we remember there's something better. Every time we see Imperial officers eating real food while we subsist on factory waste, we remember the inequality. Every time a child asks what fresh means, we remember what they've stolen from us. The rebellion talks about freedom and justice and restoring the Republic. Those are noble ideas, important ideas. But for many of us in the lower levels, the revolution is about something simpler. The right to taste real food again. The right to feed our children something that didn't come from a gray box. The right to remember what it means to share a meal that nourishes not just the body, but the spirit. The Empire thinks they've won by reducing us to this, by making survival itself a daily struggle. They haven't, because every meal, no matter how terrible, is a reminder that we're still here, still hungry, still human. And one day, when the Empire finally falls, when their factories shut down and their supply lines collapse, we'll remember this. We'll remember what they fed us, what they forced us to become, what they stole, and we'll feast on their ashes.